Have you ever stopped and wondered what the real secret is behind a massive, complex project actually working out? I'm talking about anything from a multi-billion-dollar fighter jet to, your own personal 5-year plan. It turns out there's this hidden structure, an unseen blueprint that really separates success from failure. And it all starts with a simple question.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, right? You've got this bleeding edge military hardware, a company trying to do good for the planet, one product at a time, and the place you get your coffee every morning. I mean, on the surface, they couldn't be more different. But underneath it all, they actually share a fundamental secret to getting things done and getting them done right.
And that's really the core idea we're going to unpack here. Every successful project, whether it's huge or tiny, relies on this blueprint, a structured, intentional way of thinking that connects a great idea to a real-world result. So let's dive in and uncover the 3 key parts of that blueprint.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about the problem this whole blueprint idea is meant to solve. And it's something I think we've all experienced. That massive, sometimes frustrating gap that opens up between a beautiful plan on paper and what actually happens out in the real world.
So get this. This quote comes from a Department of Defense report on reliability, and it's a really high-stakes admission. They're basically saying that even with all their resources, all their brain power, their predictions about how equipment will perform often just don't match what soldiers are actually experiencing. This isn't a small problem. This gap can lead to mission failure and, frankly, wasted billions. So the crucial question is, why does this happen? Now, what's so fascinating about this chart is that it shows failure isn't a simple story. It's not just one thing. You've got issues from manufacturing, random parts, a bit of design. But hang on, look at that huge slice. 20% of reported failures had no defect found. Think about what that means. The equipment failed in the field, where it matters most, but back in the clean, controlled lab, it worked perfectly. That right there, that 20%, is the great divide we're talking about. So how do we even begin to close that gap? Well, the very first step is tackling what we can call the translation problem, making sure you're actually aiming at the right target from the very beginning.
And this just illustrates the problem perfectly. A soldier's real need is simple. It's visceral. I need a rifle that will not jam when I'm covered in mud. But that raw need has to be translated into a technical specification for a contract. And suddenly it becomes about passing a very specific clean room lab test. See the disconnect? If that translation isn't perfect, you can build a rifle that technically meets the contract but completely fails the soldier.
And this isn't just a military thing. It's everywhere. In the world of sustainability, companies are trying to align their product development with these huge long-term targets, like the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And in any business, every good standard operating procedure, or SOP, starts with a crystal clear purpose. So you see, defining the real goal is the universal first step.
Okay, so once you have the right goal, you need the actual blueprint to get there. This is all about the power of a structured process. It's the series of steps that methodically connects your starting point to your finish line.
Now take a look at this. This chart shows the process for developing a new military system. I know, it looks incredibly intimidating, and honestly, that's kind of the point. The stakes are so ridiculously high that every single phase, from the initial concept all the way to disposal, is mapped out in excruciating detail. This is what you'd call a heavyweight blueprint for a truly heavyweight problem. But the thing is, the blueprint doesn't have to be that complicated. Here's a super common process from the world of sustainable product development called stage gate. It's much cleaner, right? But the logic is exactly the same. You have these clear steps and these gates, which are basically decision points where you ask, should we keep going? It's a smart way to make sure you don't pour a ton of resources into a bad idea. And we can bring it all the way down to the simplest level. Let's go back to that coffee shop. A standard operating procedure for, say, making a latte has the exact same DNA. There's a clear purpose, step-by-step instructions, decision points, like what do you do if the milk frother breaks, and metrics for success. It just goes to show you this principle scales all the way from fighter jets to lattes. So, you've defined your goal, you've built your process, but your blueprint is pretty much useless without the right fuel, and that fuel is data. High-quality, reliable information is what makes this whole engine run. This table from that DoD report is fantastic because it makes an absolutely crucial point. Not all data is created equal. The highest fidelity, the most trustworthy data comes from actual equipment being used in the real world, the field data. And way down at the very bottom, the performance numbers a manufacturer just slaps on a spec sheet. Relying on that low-fidelity data is like building your entire blueprint on a foundation of sand. And here's where we find another universal problem, one that's echoed in the research on sustainable development. The biggest decisions, the ones that lock in costs and features, have to be made in the early phases, which is exactly when you have the least amount of that high-quality, high-fidelity data. Designers call this the design paradox, and it is a massive, massive challenge. So, after looking at military planning, sustainable products, and even just daily business operations, what's the big takeaway here? How can you use all this to build your own blueprint for success in whatever it is you're trying to achieve? It really just boils down to these 3 keys. First, you have to obsess over defining the real goal, not just the technical one on paper. Second, build a structured process. That's your blueprint, with clear steps and decision points. And third, you have to fuel that blueprint with the absolute highest quality data you can possibly find. And that's the big reveal, isn't it? The same core logic that helps put a state-of-the-art fighter jet in the air can also help a company develop a greener product, make a local coffee shop run like clockwork, or even help you map out your own 5-year plan. So the final question is really for you. Think about it, whether it's at work, at home, maybe for a personal passion project. What's one area where defining the goal better, building a real process, and getting better data could make all the difference? What unseen blueprint is just waiting for you to build it?